The £22 billion black hole has become Labour's go-to excuse for everything. From cracking down on protesters to slashing winter fuel payments for pensioners, Keir Starmer and his government have wielded this figure like a political shield. But one MP has just blown their narrative apart, and the truth is far more damaging than anyone expected. For months, whenever Labour faced criticism, the response was always the same. The Conservatives left us with a £22 billion black hole. This convenient catch-all excuse justified tax hikes, benefit cuts, and harsh austerity measures that hit ordinary families hardest. The public believed it because it sounded credible, official, authoritative. But here's the problem. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the independent body responsible for economic forecasts, has never published a £22 billion figure. Not once. Not anywhere. The actual projected shortfall they reported was £9.5 billion, and even that was based on incomplete Treasury data and described as a pessimistic scenario. Labour MP Chris Phillips delivered the knockout blow during parliamentary questioning. He had read the OBR report thoroughly and found something shocking. The £22 billion figure simply doesn't exist. The only reference to any deficit appears on page 2 in Table 1, where the Treasury could only identify numbers totaling £9.5 billion. Even then, the OBR explicitly stated it was impossible to judge how much of that might actually materialize. When Chancellor Rachel Reeves claimed there was a £22 billion black hole, she was being economical with the truth. The OBR report proves this figure was fabricated. Phillips demanded an apology for misleading Parliament, pointing out that this invented crisis doesn't justify the largest tax rises in British history. So how did Labour construct this mythical black hole? They lumped together completely unrelated spending commitments. $7 billion in expenditure already forecast before the March budget. $5.6 billion attributed to public sector pay increases. Additional costs for asylum seeker support and rail infrastructure overruns. They basically added up every possible expense they could find and called it an inherited crisis. If you're finding this as shocking as we are, make sure to subscribe because this story gets even worse. Former Conservative Chancellor Jeremy Hunt didn't mince words, calling Labour's claim complete nonsense. No independent economic authority has ever verified a £22 billion deficit. Yet Labour continues doubling down, making this fabricated figure the central pillar of their entire economic narrative. The political calculation was cynical, but clear. Create a crisis narrative to justify unpopular policies. Present tax hikes. And spending cuts as unavoidable consequences of conservative mismanagement rather than deliberate Labour choices. It's classic political sleight of hand, but they've been caught red-handed. The consequences are devastating Labour's credibility. Public trust is evaporating as people realize they've been misled. Winter fuel payments were axed for millions of pensioners not because of financial necessity, but because Labour chose to prioritize other spending. £8 billion for GB Energy, their green company that won't cut anyone's energy bills. $11 billion for overseas climate aid. These weren't forced measures, but conscious political decisions. Internal Treasury documents reveal senior officials knew the £22 billion figure was questionable, but allowed it to be used publicly anyway. This isn't just political spin. Gone wrong. It's institutional dishonesty at the highest levels of government. The electoral consequences are already visible. Snap polls show dramatic decline in confidence in Labour's economic competence. Even former supporters are abandoning ship. Chef Tom Kerridge, who endorsed Labour at the election, called their budget catastrophic. Business leaders are fleeing the country rather than face punitive tax rises justified by a fabricated crisis. More millionaires are leaving Britain than any other country. 10,000 departures this year alone. Government borrowing costs have hit 27-year highs. Growth has flatlined. Business confidence has collapsed. This isn't inherited chaos. This is a crisis made in Downing Street. Starmer seems to have forgotten he's now Prime Minister, not opposition leader. The time for blaming predecessors is over. The economy is his responsibility, and he's failing spectacularly. The £22 billion black hole has been exposed as Labour's biggest lie. The question now is whether they'll finally tell the truth about their real economic agenda or continue doubling down on deception until voters inevitably punish them for it.